afternoon. Muko mbali? Leto. Wako mbali bwana. Na tuonyeshe tuonyeshe mrembo.
Leto wewe wapi mrembo? Ama warembo?
Okay. Well, that is a team. Mnaweza kukaa pande hii. Yes, these are friends who came to see us. Are you set? Anasema kidogo. Yule mrefu yule. Those ones are Azimio ambassadors. They just introduce themselves and they're called Azimio ambassadors, actually in the diaspora. So, set now? Okay, give us a signal, Muref. Okay. This is a press statement by Azimio la Umoja, One Kenya Coalition Party, May the 7th. Is that accurate? Or is it 8th? 8th. I think it's 8th. So correct, the 8th, 2024 Nairobi. We are dealing with the issues of the raging floods, the doctor strike, General Gola's tragic death, and fake fertilizer scam, which is ongoing, and basically summarizing this as KK is a disastrous regime. We have apologies from our sister mother, Karua. She's having meetings, which is part of this presser. And also Mheshimiwa Kioni was actually to be here, was having a meeting. He's also trying to get here. But he's also Mheshimiwa Wycliffe Oparanya, ODM, our sister coalition partner, having their central committee meetings going on. And Mwangi wa Iria as well, Governor Mwangi wa Iria. So this is a collective Azimio statement. And I need to say I mentioned this to our team leader. As you know, I think it's now clear that Mheshimiwa Raila Odinga remains our team leader until after the elections in 2025. This should put to rest then some of the concerns expressed countrywide about his recent tour of Mukuru with us in Azimio, and the remarks that are made, which are in line with the proper running of opposition politics. I'll deal with first the raging floods being a national disaster. The Azimio la Umoja One Kenya Coalition is deeply concerned about the serious disruptions the heavy rains continue to cause in the country. In the last few days, the country has witnessed heavy rainfall with widespread destructive floods on our dear citizens, materials, the economy, indeed the environment. The floods have affected most parts of the country. Azimio expresses its sadness about the increasing number of casualties of the raging floods. The media report indicates that there are over 238 people dead, 300,000 households displaced, and still 75 people missing. 150 schools are also directly affected. Residential buildings are collapsing, like the one going on in Uthiru. Farms submerged, 178 dams and reservoirs bursting their capacities, and several people at risk of contracting waterborne diseases. I wouldn't even say several people at the risk, a lot of people. The Delta region, for example, because the River Tana, as you know, down from up on the Seven Forks dams. A lot of them have reached capacity in the river Tana, then continues to overflow, causing damage, as you may have seen in Garissa. People have to use boats to move from Mandogo area to cross into Garissa. A great risk, and we haven't even seen this regime trying to do anything there to alleviate the situation. The situation becomes more difficult even downstream as the river races towards the coast. I mean, where Kipini area, where the river Tana joins the Indian Ocean. This is devastating, and we sincerely send our deepest sympathies to the families and communities affected. As a coalition, we continue to mobilize resources to help in the mitigation of some of the adverse effects on livelihoods. On Thursday and Friday last week, we visited Mumbuni Primary School in Machakos County and Kwaruben Secondary School in Nairobi, where we donated essential items to more than 2,000 affected households. We ask the public to join us as we help our fellow Kenyans. We also take this opportunity today to commend the Red Cross, who have, from the onset of the raging floods, helped to save countless lives. We have watched them use all means available, including boats, choppers, and other equipment to rescue stranded Kenyans in all parts of the country. Without their effort, this would have been an even worse disaster. It is not lost to us that today, May the 8th, is World Red Cross and Red Crescent Day. We celebrate you. Kenyans can recall that last year, the Kenya Meteorological Director, Mr. Gikungu, issued an early warning about the expected heavy rains that could lead to catastrophic flooding in the country. This was a scientific and expert opinion confirming the impending El Nino rains. Unfortunately, his advice was immediately disregarded by the Kenya Kwanza regime, and Mr. Gikungu was made to apologize, actually publicly, in a press conference in the presence of the Deputy President for allegedly miscommunicating and contradicting the President. It is now turning out that it is President Ruto and his regime that misled the country with regard to El Nino. He has recently admitted that the meteorological reports paint a dire picture, quote unquote. This is coming too late in the day from a regime that is in itself a disaster. While it is a constitutional obligation of the national government to address disaster management under the fourth schedule of the Constitution of Kenya 2010, we note the Kenya Kwanza regime has failed to adequately respond to the devastating floods. This is a sign of an incompetent government with no regard for its citizens. With all the widespread disruptions witnessed, the Kenya Kwanza regime is reluctant to declare the floods a national disaster so that it can get the adequate response needed. We are aware that such a declaration will automatically call for the expenditure from the country's contingency fund. Could it be that there is no money in the contingency fund? If no money, who has expended the money and on what? Kenyans want to know. We also note that President Ruto recently announced in Mathare that the households affected by the floods will each receive 10,000 shillings, with 1 billion already set aside. Again, this is a case of too little, too late. For the families who have lost everything, such allocations are too little to start afresh. We demand that the government increase the financial support to at least 100,000 shillings per family and immediately launch an emergency aid appeal for all the flood victims in Kenya. Red Cross projects that the flood situation could need at least 7 billion shillings. We demand that the government immediately deploys all the necessary responses for mitigating the impact of the flooding on affected communities, including the provision of assistance to the bereaved families and the internally displaced. We know that the regime is forcefully evicting people from the areas perceived to be flood-prone and riparian land. And such evacuations, whether mandatory or voluntary, must be done in a humane manner that respects human rights without causing further deaths. The reckless and reactionary strategy of the Kenya Kwanza regime has caused the death of a young boy by the name Ian Otieno. Ian was killed yesterday when the government bulldozers forcefully evicted those living in Mathare. Almost a day or so after President Ruto had been there and telling everybody that you will not be moved until at least some adequate alternative shelter has been found. On Saturday, 2 Kenyans also lost their lives in similar circumstances in Mukuru slums. These actions of a disastrous regime must stop. In light of the current tragedy, we demand that this regime adopt protective measures of early warnings and facilitation relocation of communities in imminent risk of being affected by the floods and adhere to effective disaster management strategies. Azimio also insists that the Kenya Kwanza regime, A, provides emergency relief services, including food, shelter, and medical care to meet the basic needs of all the displaced, evicted, and affected populations. B, deliver assistance in rebuilding homes and infrastructure destroyed by the floods with an emphasis on sustainable development and disaster-resilient construction. C, develop and strengthen infrastructure and systems that enhance the country's resilience to natural disasters and facilitate effective response mechanisms. And D, fast-track policies and legislative frameworks that focus on comprehensive disaster risk reduction and climate adaptation measures and ensure active community involvement in these processes. Number 2, the doctor strike is another disaster. Azimio expresses concerns over the 2 months of doctor strike that has disrupted healthcare services in the country. This is another disaster that has been occasioned by disastrous Kenya Kwanza regime in its failure to fully promptly address the doctors' concerns. The doctor strike continues to highlight the incompetence of the Kenya Kwanza regime in dealing with the healthcare system in our country. The response from the regime has not only been inadequate, but also completely out of touch with the reality facing the people. We note that the Labor and Relations Court has ordered the striking doctors and the government to reach an agreement within 48 hours, and I think time has been ticking. While we have seen the efforts by the doctors to end the strike, we are yet to see the commitment from the government side to do the same. We ask the Kenya Kwanza regime to take advantage of the 48-hour window given by the courts and immediately reach an agreement with doctors that you see a resumption of normalcy in public hospitals, failure to which we shall mobilize the public and other unions to join in a national strike. We have said this before, and there are various ways of actually joining in this endeavor. What we're basically saying is, can this matter come to an end? As a result of these floods, waterborne diseases are now, we've seen the headlines in the major newspapers today, problem with cholera in Tana River County and elsewhere, everywhere. Now, with the doctors on strike, what else can this be other than disastrous? We demand for Parliament lost his life in the course of duty. Together with 9 other gallant officers of KDF. We note with concern that the Kenya Kwanza regime has moved on swiftly, leaving the families of the departed soldiers with no help. They also are yet to establish a time-bound public inquiry into the cause of the chopper crash. We reiterate our earlier demands of securing the services of independent and international experts or investigators who will get to the bottom of this matter. The ongoing investigations by the Kenya Air Force is a limited internal affair that does not satisfy the requirement of an open, transparent, independent, and credible investigation. We too demand that a parliamentary select committee inquiring into the tragedy be set up immediately. Kenyans are concerned and suspicious that the tragic death of the four-star general and his colleagues may be connected to sinister political machinations. This is particularly so given the unsubstantiated allegations against his person relating to the 2022 presidential elections. And fourthly, we want to deal with the fake fertilizer disaster. As Azimio, we thank the 149 members of the National Assembly who voted to impeach the Cabinet Secretary for Agriculture and Livestock Development. We are aware that his impeachment trial is ongoing, with Parliament calling for a special sitting to deliberate on the Select Committee report on Monday the 13th. We expect that 11 members of the Select Committee will honor the vote of the 149 members and confirm Linturi's impeachment from office. Linturi's reign as the Minister of Agriculture and Livestock Development has been nothing short of a disaster. Kenyan farmers were supplied with fake fertilizer that not only destroyed the entire planting and harvest season, but also degraded their land. The entire land has now become economical and viable for many seasons to come. This can only be described as economic sabotage. Apart from the impeding impeachment, Linturi must also be tried in the anti-corruption courts for the crimes of economic sabotage. Finally, we urge all the parliamentarians to critically scrutinize the budget policy statement and the coming Finance Bill 2024, which is bound to introduce a new wave of taxes with disastrous consequences for ordinary Kenyans who are already suffering from the current high cost of living. Indeed, we conclude that Kenya Kwanza is so far a disastrous regime that should be impeached in its entirety. But we are not into that yet. We're just sounding a warning shot. And this is a democratic country we have all fought to establish. Kama kuna maswali, ndugu zangu hawa, anaweza kuyajibu. Kama hakuna, tunawashukuruni sana. Yes, sir. Emmanuel. Yes, sir. Those are directives by Kenya Kwanza. Another public holiday. We are all for tree planting for sure. But another public holiday? I don't know. My colleagues could with regard to opening of the schools, yes, I think for once now they are looking, I think they should apologize to the Director of Meteorological Department for embarrassing him in public. Now they are properly guided scientifically. Our children definitely need to go to school. But please take into account, Emmanuel, what you have said about so many of them affected, 150 schools who need reconstruction. Mm-hmm. Yes?
My name is Walter Nyabaga from Ramogi TV. My question is that we saw Azimio move to Guru Majenga and be part of that team that visit Guru Majenga following the flash flood. That energy has not been seen towards Madare within Nairobi County.
Good question. Good question. In fact, we were in touch with a member for Mathare, Mheshimiwa Anthony Oluoch, and we must thank everybody. He felt that, yes, everybody has been to Mathare. It is never late to try and help. We haven't even visited as yet Maimahiu. We intend at some stage now to go to Maimahiu and Homa Bay. Remember the flooding that is ongoing. I think that the visit to Mukuru kwa Njenga was actually Azimio members and said, let's do Mukuru as well. But that does not mean we have left out Mathare. As you can see, the killing of this young boy from Mathare continues with pain and very insensitive regime that says one thing, you will not get your houses demolished until we move you to some higher ground, and then they do the opposite. They did that even in Mukuru. Yeah. So we'll be there. We'll try as much as we can to get to where Kenyans, and that's why also calling on Kenyans to be part of each other's keeper, not just to leave it to an insensitive regime. Let's help ourselves together. Kama kuna swali lingine?
Thank you. I think that's okay.
Thank you. Nashukuru sana.